Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you again today. And this topic that we're going to talk about today hopefully piqued your interest, even just seeing the description or the title of the episode. What if you can't stay calm? Because how often do we hear all the time? Every single mom that I talk to when we first start working together, if it's a mom in my group or if it's a couple or a dad or whatever, every single parent that I meet with for the very first time, like it's never once happened where a parent has told me that like they feel good about the fact that they're losing their temper or that they don't think staying calm is important. And never has it happened where I've talked to these new clients about how important it is to stay calm with our kids. And they are like, what? This is brand new information. I'm flabbergasted. I had no idea. That never happened. So if you're hearing me say, like, it's super important for us to be giving consequences or calm energy, there's a whole podcast episode already out there about non-attachment and neutrality. Like, I guarantee no one listening to this is like, well, that's news to me. We already know that. We already know we're supposed to be staying calm, right? But it is so hard to do it sometimes because we're human beings, not robots, and things upset us. So we're going to talk about this whole what if you can't stay calm. And as always, I'll give you a little confession. This one, a lot of times when I make my confessions, I don't really feel that bad about the stuff I'm confessing sometimes. This one, even, let's see, this will be 17 years later. I still feel really shitty about this. So back in the day when my oldest son was about 2 and we had a newborn baby, we were also selling our house. And anyone out there who's trying to move and sell your house, you know what I'm talking about before I even start talking about it. Keeping your house clean while you live in it so that at a moment's notice, someone can come and, look at the house and maybe buy it is full stop impossible, whether or not you have kids. Now I have a toddler and a newborn baby. Forget it. Getting the house clean and trying to sell this house was like more than a full-time job, and it was like destroying me. And there was this one day where we had to get out of the house super quick because a showing was happening and everything had gone wrong all morning long in terms of like getting the house ready and everything. And then finally, it was like time for us to go. It was like crunch time to get in the car. I'd already had the baby in the car. I'm trying to get my oldest in the car, and he is fighting me on putting his coat on and whining and like doing the thing where his arms turn into like noodles and stuff like that. And I just got increasingly and increasingly frustrated and finally screamed at him. This is a direct quote. And you know that I feel bad about this because how many direct quotes do you remember 18 years later or 16 years later? I remember this. I remember every word that I said because I'll never forget it. And I was on the phone with somebody at the time that I said this. So there's like a witness to this horrible thing that I said to him. I literally said, Elijah, if you don't get your hand in this sleeve right now, I will rip it off of your body and shove it in there myself. I literally said that to an innocent 2-year-old child. It was horrible. I feel terrible about it still today and humiliated that I said it right in front of someone on the phone. And mostly I just feel really remorseful that I said something hurtful to my son, of course. But the whole reason why I bring this up, I mean, you can connect the dots. Like, obviously, I was not able to stay calm in that situation. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. What happens if you can't stay calm? What if you can't stay calm? And the reason why I decided to use this topic for today is because I've had several conversations recently with clients about the concept of regulation and co-regulation. So, and most people, when I say, like, do you know what co-regulation is? They're kind of like, I could guess what it is, but I'm not 100% sure. So let's talk about it. So co-regulation happens before, if you're having a biological birth, the co-regulation happens with your baby, with you and your baby, if you're a mom, right out the chute, before baby is even earthside, you're co-regulating. So, and of course, all babies co-regulate with whatever womb they are in, whether it's going to be their mom or not. So co-regulation happens right from the beginning. And what it means is, in the beginning anyway, what it means is that for newborn babies or not even born babies, um, their nervous system is not fully developed. And how they pace themselves and regulate their biorhythms is by pacing themselves and syncing up with the biorhythms of the womb that they're in. And then after they're born, the person who's holding them, their caregiver. And so things like their heartbeat, their breathing, their body temperature, all of these things are stabilized by being in the presence of their caregiver. So this is why we see, incidents of SIDS go down when kids are co-sleeping in the same room as their parents, for example, things like that. Babies literally are still working out the kinks in their nervous systems, and so their nervous systems sync to the biorhythms of the presence of the caretakers around them. Well, all of those things that I just talked about, temperature, breathing, heartbeat, all that's not part of your what's called your autonomic nervous system. It's the part of your body that's running behind the scenes, completely autonomous from your conscious control. You don't think about breathing, your breathing just happens. You don't think about you're not telling your heart to beat, it's just beating, right? But there's a whole nother part of your nervous system that's about your emotions and responding to safety and things like that. So things like when you get startled, your heartbeat races, you might start sweating, you have a facial expression of startle. If you, of course, you see babies, they have startle reflexes where their arms fling out and things like that. That's all part of your nervous system too. And what we're learning more and more with more studies and all this stuff, it's so fascinating, but children sync their nervous systems to their caregivers in that way too. So if you are anxious and upset, that is something that is transmitted to the people around you. And, this probably isn't rocket science to most of us, right? Like, how many people do you know where every time you're around them, they're so amped up, you feel amped up, or they're so negative or depressed that it brings you down, or they're so positive and excited and optimistic that you start believing in things that you really don't believe in half the time, but you start, I do think I can do it. I'm kind of borrowing your confidence in me or something like that. This happens. This isn't just kids, right? All human beings, we really pick up on the energy, that level of energy and emotion from the people around us. We're such social creatures. We are so tuned into the people around us always, no matter how old we are, no matter how developed and evolved and mature we get, we still are super tuned into that energy. And kids are no exception, and especially kids with their parents. So if you're like most of my clients, as I'm saying this, your like parent guilt reflex is kicking in and you're starting to beat yourself up because like, oh my gosh, so if I'm stressed out, I'm stressing my kid out. I have to be calm all the time. I have to be, when they're upset, if I lose my temper, like I'm upsetting them. And so I need to be like Mother Teresa all the time around my child. I need to be like the Buddha and, just be super zen constantly. And of course, I'm not like that because nobody is, right? So even though I don't know you, I already know that you're not zen like all the time. Well, that means I must be failing my child. That means that I must be, letting my kid down or not giving my kid what they need. I'm a loser. And here's where I want to help you with that because it's total bullshit. That is just your brain trying to beat the crap out of you. We don't do that here. So instead, I want you to think about this. Let's go back to that story where I lost my, what, with my oldest kiddo. The problem isn't that I was dysregulated. The problem is that I stayed present and continued to persist, even though it was becoming more and more increasingly obvious that I was not capable of staying calm. So it's never going to happen that you're calm around your child all of the time. Even if you implement all the stuff you learned on this podcast today, you still will not be able to do this. But the most important thing for you to do is not to put this pressure on yourself to stay calm, but to instead give yourself the much more achievable task of raising awareness around whether or not you are calm. You're not supposed to be calm all the time, but it is possible for us to know if we're calm or not, and then respond to that accordingly. So, in an ideal world, which we don't live in, these amazing divine beings that come out of us into the world would be raised by gods and goddesses, and their divinity would be matched in the divinity of their parents. Well, guess what? That's not how the system works. These amazing, perfect, precious, holy beings come into the world and get raised by fuck ups like me and you. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So, in this amazing divine fantasy land, what'd be really cool is like every single time a kid is upset, they are in the calm, loving, compassionate, non attached presence of a caretaker that allows them to co regulate and calm down by being in the presence of this amazing calming energy. That can happen sometimes, and sometimes it can't happen. And that doesn't mean that you're failing your child, because the other thing that gets to happen for kids is sometimes they have to learn how to regulate themselves. And the beauty of a nervous system, especially a developed nervous system, I'm not talking about a newborn baby, I'm talking about like the 2-year-old in my story, for example. A developed nervous system, a developing nervous system, not only has the ability to co regulate, your kid also has the ability to self regulate. So when you recognize, if you cultivate this ability to be aware, you're just cultivating self awareness. I know I'm not calm right now. I am a shit show. If you have that awareness, you are giving your child a major gift, because instead of staying present and being this dysregulating force for your child because you are not calm at all, you can say, this must not be a co-regulating time. This must be a self-regulating time, because I got to get out of here, and walk away. Taking space is the very first parenting skill that all of my clients learn with me. Whether we're talking about a 2-year-old, I'm going to use the song like Love and Logic encourages us to, or we're talking about a teenager and we're taking space by walking away and literally leaving the house, or going in our room and locking the door and having time alone. Taking space is huge. And the reason why is because when we are participating in an interaction with someone while we are dysregulated, the only possible outcome of that is to make the situation worse. So what I did wrong in that situation wasn't getting upset. It wasn't not being calm. It was not walking away. And there is absolutely no reason, no matter, even if these potential home buyers were knocking on my front door in that moment, there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't have just left the room, gone into the bathroom or something like that for a minute, and just let myself come back down to earth before I clearly did not even need to put my kid's coat on him. I could have just grabbed his coat and picked him up and carried him out to the car and had the coat in the car. Like it's a million different solutions to that situation, and none of them involved me screaming at my child. But because I was dysregulated and I refused to acknowledge that I was dysregulated, I chose scenario Z, which was the worst possible thing I could have done. It's not because I was dysregulated that was a mistake. It's because I stayed present and I was oblivious to my dysregulation that was a mistake. So you absolutely will need to leave and take space. You will not be able to be this co-regulation source for your child always or in perpetuity. And guess what? You're not supposed to. Those times when we give our kids a chance to regulate themselves are really important. They're not just happening because we dropped the ball and we couldn't hack it. They happen because kids need times when they're pushed and challenged to up level their skill set, do something they haven't done before. learn that they actually can rely on themselves and that they actually have their own backs too, right? This is really, really important. Okay. So think about that today. Think about the fact that co-regulation is a thing. So the flip side of this is when you are calm, you get to be this amazing force for good in your kid's life simply by being present. Imagine as your child is throwing a tantrum, you're just sitting presently there, totally calm and quiet, and you're not trying to fix anything. You're not doing anything to make the situation better or make it go away. But the fact that you exist and the energy that you are exuding is calm and compassionate, that is making a difference. That's a real thing. This is a little sidebar, but just to underscore this for everybody, before I started doing parent work, I was a birth doula. And one of the things they taught us in our doula training was this really cool study they did, like back in the 80s, I think, um, where they had women randomly be assigned to 3 different groups when they came into the hospital to have their baby. One group was like no change, no doula, no nothing. One was they had a doula with them who was like totally actively helping them with their labor, explaining things and helping them with their comfort and all that stuff. And the third group was a group where they got a doula, but the doula didn't do anything. They just sat calmly in the corner of the room. And that was it. And the results of that study were astounding. How simply having that person present in the room with these laboring moms made massive, like measurable differences in their birth outcomes and their experience of their birth. Just having that calm presence was enough to help these women who are in labor co-regulate and stay calm and do all these really amazing pieces of the puzzle that helped them successfully have their babies in more positive ways. That's a real thing. It is a real thing. And as a doula, there were plenty of times where it's like, there's nothing I can do to help this situation physically, but me being here and not freaking out is a massive help. And it was really good for me to know that as a doula. And it's really good for me to know that as a mom. There are so many times, especially now that a lot of my kids are older, they have problems I can't solve. I can't do anything about the fact that they're having social drama at school. Like, by the time you're 14, your mom trying to help you with your friend situation is not going to help. There's nothing I can do about that, for example. Or I can't do anything about the fact that my 16-year-old has beef with his boss, or, that my 18-year-old is scared about making friends when he goes off to college. There's nothing I can do to make that easier for any of them. But I know that I'm still an important helpmeet to all of them while they go through those challenges simply by being present with them. And there are many times where I have conversations with my kids where all I just do is just validate their emotions and be sympathetic and give them lots of hugs. And that's it. You can see, especially with younger kids, you can almost physically see them. At a certain point in a conversation, you might say, do you need a hug? Or this really sucks. Do you want to just sit with me for a minute? And you watch them sit next to you. You don't do anything. You don't say anything, but they go from totally upset and railing at the world to just kind of like acceptance and calming down. And then, at least I can say that with my 9-year-old, you can almost see a facial expression change where he's like, all right, I guess I got to go do it. Whether it's like doing his chores or getting ready for bed or telling his friend that he can't play right now, whatever upsetting situation it is. So, that's a flip side of this. Like sometimes you will not be able to be calm, and that's not a problem. That's a time to take space, and that's an opportunity for your child to get better and better and better at self-regulation. It's supposed to work that way. And sometimes you will be able to stay calm, and in which case you get to be this amazing co-regulation source for your child, which is pure magic. And the last thing I'm going to say about this before I answer a listener's question is, let's take these concepts and make them really tangible, because if you have young children, I guarantee that you've heard this kind of debate between time out and time in. My answer is both and neither. And What I mean by that is my clients learn a different technique of taking space that doesn't do a lot of the things that traditional timeout does, like counting and giving a lecture at the end and, setting a timer and all that stuff. So it's not really timeout, but it is taking space. And when I say, so that's what I mean when I say neither, because I don't love those elements of, well, do you know what you did? Now, why do we do that? Now, what do you need to do now to make it right? And all that stuff. No, thank you. That's just like a shame cherry on top of a shit cake that we just gave our kids. So a lot of those elements that can be present in both time out and time in, I say no to. So that's what I mean when I say neither. I say both because just like I said, sometimes you actually are able to be this calm co-regulation source. And in that case, whatever modified version of a time in is fabulous. Let your kid throw the tantrum and just be that calm person sitting on the couch waiting for them to finish running their number. That's awesome. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're too upset. Sometimes your kid is too upset. Sometimes your kid is too aggressive, too violent, too out of control to really be safe around other people. And guess what? Sometimes we are too aggressive, too out of control, etc., to be safe around other people. And when I say safe, I mean emotionally safe, obviously. But those are those times when a time in is a terrible idea because all you're doing is increasingly dysregulating each other. It's terrible. There is co-regulation happening, and it is you are co-regulating, meaning you are amping yourself up to meet your child's amped up energy, and your child is amping themselves up to reach your amped up energy. Co-regulation is happening all the time. It's just that it's up to us to really take the reins and say, okay, the kind of co-regulation that can come out of this interaction is not great. So I'm going to remove myself from the situation. So that's all that's my little, you got a little spoiler there about my thoughts on time in and time out also. And as always, we get to end our talk with a question from a listener. So this question comes from a listener called Anna. It's not me. Okay, I know we both have similar names, but I promise I'm not making this question up. So this mama is struggling with, Anna is struggling with thankfulness and gratitude with her kiddo. And this is what she said. And unfortunately, Anna, you did not share the age of your kiddo, but maybe I'm wrong. As I read this, I might discover it in here. So, for some reason, this time of year is bringing out the sweetest behavior and also really ungrateful behavior from my oldest child. I'm looking for a good documentary of children that live in less ideal living situations around the world. We're not wealthy, but we're also not hard off. And while I never want my child to go through serious hardship, I also respect the strength in children who persevere through it. My child has been through tough times, but he's never gone without or been unloved or seriously injured. I just want a way to show him how good he's got it and maybe entice a couple of good behavior days out of him with a sense of gratitude. Because she finishes saying, let's be real. This kid's got it good. Okay, Anna. First of all, I guarantee there are people listening to this podcast who are like, yeah. And I've actually had this conversation, not just with clients, but with friends over the years. This idea of like, why do our kids not appreciate how great life can be? And there's an episode that came out a couple weeks ago where I talked a little bit about hardship and trauma being kind of a necessary experience for kids to complete their brain development. So that whole like, why does this happen? No matter how good our kids have it, they still somehow don't appreciate it and complain about it and find some part of their life that's the worst. That's one reason why. It's not just because they don't have the ability or the perspective to compare and say, oh, well, I have it better than this other situation, but also because literally, like psychologically, kids need to feel hardship in order to completely develop and progress the maturation of their brains. Now, that doesn't mean we give our kids hardship. It means that our kids will invent hardship for themselves no matter how great their lives are. So you don't have to worry about inventing hardship for your kids or engineering hardship in their lives. Like they'll figure it out. So that's the why of why this happens. And here's what I'm going to say about this. I totally get the concept of like, well, maybe if my kid had this more information, I mean, this is essentially what Anna is saying, right? She's saying, like, if my child saw a documentary or learned about how people around the world live, they would have more information, they would have more perspective, they'd have more objectivity. And now that new information will teach them that their lives are actually pretty great. And unfortunately, it's not wrong to, I mean, it's a great idea to show your kids documentaries. There's a really good one out there it's not for kids, but it's totally kid appropriate, which is literally called Happy. And it's a documentary about happiness and how around the world people live and why they don't necessarily feel sad, even though there's time they might be living in hardship or hard times and things like that. There's another one that came out. This one came out along. This is going to date me when I tell you this, but it came out, I want to say like 15 years ago, and it came out on Mother's Day, and it was literally a documentary about mothers all around the world. And you see like a mom in Africa holding her baby, and their babies don't wear diapers, and I think there was a Mongolian mom, an Asian mom, and I can't remember all of them. It's been a long time since I've seen that documentary. So anyway, those are a couple of documentaries that would be great for your kids to be exposed to, and it's not going to work. The reason why kids struggle with gratitude and perspective and all of that stuff isn't because it's not for a lack of our exposure or teaching them or telling them stuff. It's because that's just really not where their brains are at. True empathy and compassion, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and stuff like that, doesn't really develop until late in adolescence and early adulthood. So I, especially around Christmas time, get lots and lots of questions about, why is my kid not grateful? Why is my kid so selfish? Why is my kid so, you know, myopic? That's just because that's what kids are. They're myopic and selfish and ungrateful. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have boundaries and rules around that stuff. So we absolutely can have rules about, I do nice things for kids who say thank you or who appreciate the things that I do for them. And the last time I did this for you, sorry, but you didn't even say thank you, or you were kind of rude, or you complained about it, whatever it is. So, I think I'm going to take a break from doing that for you for a while. Things like that. Absolutely. Some boundaries and consequences about manners. That's what we think we're trying to teach our kids gratitude, but we're really trying to teach them manners. We're trying to teach them, like, when someone does something for you, you say thank you. The actual feeling of gratitude, the actual feeling of empathy, the actual perspective and objectivity that we eventually want our children to have doesn't come from forcing them to say thank you. And it doesn't come until kids are much older. So I hope that at least normalizes for you the fact that your kiddo is struggling with this part of himself, because he hasn't gotten there yet. But he will. I think the documentary idea is a fun idea, not because it's going to change his behavior, but because it's always great to just, have shared experiences with our kids and be alongside them as they're learning something new. And that's the other reason why watching a documentary is probably not going to teach your child different behaviors long term anyway. It's because talking doesn't teach, which I'm sure everyone's heard me say a million times already. Talking doesn't teach. So even if it's a documentary that's talking to your kid, doesn't teach. Experiences and modeling teach. So you model gratitude, you set boundaries and consequences and experiences up for your child around gratitude. Over time, your child is going to, well, first, it's going to be learning the manners of gratitude. But eventually, as your child's brain expands and their cognitive ability to think beyond the end of their own nose grows, it will turn into true gratitude and perspective and appreciation and all those things. And I can tell you, because right now I have older teenagers, my 16 and 18-year-old surprisingly often express some really great insights about how lucky they are and how, blessed their lives are and things like that. And honestly, that's kind of early. So I'm proud and I feel accomplished in that department. I'm really happy for them and stuff like that. My 14-year-old and my 9-year-old, not so much. So And that's okay. It's not something that keeps me awake at night because I know that it's something that comes later. And let's face it, even as adults, some of us struggle with gratitude and appreciation. Our brains are wired to look for wrong and harm and lack and problems. So we are wired to the negative. Gratitude is something that we have to cultivate in ourselves. And so I commend you, Anna, so much. I love that you are working on this. And I want to give you the long perspective of patience on the whole thing. So I hope that's helpful for you. I can't wait to talk to you all again next week. And I will see you again soon. If you want to get your questions answered, do not forget to go to my website, AnnKaplanParentCoach.com, and use that contact form. Submit your question. You want to remain anonymous? That's cool. I will answer anything and everything. Send me all your questions, even if it's questions about me. And if you know that you're ready to get this goodness in your life, if you want to sit down and talk with me and get my eyes on your family, set up a free discovery call. It's free. What do you have to lose? An hour and a half of us chatting. I guarantee you're going to walk away with some amazing takeaways, whether or not you decide that I'm your amazing, perfect fit for coaching going forward. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Bye. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.